They say I was at the movies during the murder, but no one remembers seeing me there. Can my alibi hold up? Hi, I'm here to help. This is a legal advice video series. And today we are going to be discussing what happens when someone claims that they were somewhere else when a crime took place. Specifically, we are going to be looking at whether someone's alibi will hold up if they were at a movie theater, watching a film when a murder took place elsewhere. Now, it's important to mention that this video is just a hypothetical analysis. It's for entertainment purposes only, and it should not be taken as legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact an attorney in your state. So let's talk about the facts of this case. Here, the prosecution is saying that you were at the movies when a murder took place, but nobody saw you there. So obviously nobody can testify that you were there. Therefore, the prosecution would have to rely on circumstantial evidence to prove that you were there. The state might be able to show that you bought a ticket to the movie, that you drove to the movie theater and parked your car in the parking lot. Or maybe they have surveillance footage of you walking into the movie theater. But even if you left right after the movie ended, the state still has no way to prove that you didn't commit the murder, since nobody saw you during the time of the murder. For an alibi to hold up, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you had the opportunity and the means to commit the crime. And also, all of the evidence must be consistent with your version of events. So if you say you were at home alone and the prosecution can't disprove that, then your alibi will hold up and the prosecution will fail to prove their case. But in this situation, the prosecution probably has some circumstantial evidence that you were out, which will require you to testify and present evidence to support your alibi. Now, here's where things get interesting. You will have to take the stand and testify that you were at the movies. But the prosecution doesn't know which movie you watched. Maybe you watched Avengers Endgame, which was really popular back in 2019. So the state goes to the movie theater where you supposedly were and gets the film that was playing at that time, which they believe is the same movie that you watched. They take that film and they look through the movie to see if they can find any evidence that you were watching it. Now, you may think, awesome, Avengers Endgame is 3 hours long. So even if they scrub through the whole movie, they won't find anything. Well, here's the thing. In the opening scenes of Avengers Endgame, there is a scene in a movie theater. The camera pans across all of these different people who are watching different movies in the theater. One of the people they pan across is Robert Downey Jr., as Tony Stark sitting in a movie theater seat. Now, this scene lasts for maybe 30 seconds, but it would be very easy for the state to pause on a frame of that scene and use it as evidence that you were watching that movie. They could even have an expert review the film footage and give a detailed breakdown of how this particular scene was filmed. They could show that the scene was not filmed in a studio, but rather that it was filmed inside of a real movie theater. They could show that the seats were actually from that particular theater, making it more likely that you were watching that movie. And they could even call the manager of the theater to testify about how many people were in attendance for that particular showing of the movie. So now the state has significant evidence that you were watching that particular movie. They don't have any way of knowing when you arrived at the theater or when you left the theater. So it's not impossible that you left before the murder started. However, let's assume that you stayed until the end of the movie. Then they would have proven that you were there when the movie started, and they would only have to show that you stayed through the end of the movie to prove that you were there during the murder. There is another problem here, though. When the police interviewed the other people who were in the theater, they all said that they remembered the person who sat next to you, and that person said that you were in your seat during the murder. Again, this is where things get interesting, because you can try to argue that there is a reasonable explanation for why that other person would make a misidentification. You can argue that maybe you were in the bathroom during the murder. However, if the prosecution calls that other person to the stand, and they testify that they remember you leaving your seat during the movie, then you would have to leave that testimony unrebutted. You would want to call another witness to the stand to rebut that testimony, because that would result in multiple witnesses both saying that you were not in your seat during the murder, and it would be hard to rebut their testimony. Maybe you can try to argue that you were out in the hallway talking to someone or getting concessions. But those are weak alibis, and it would be easy for the prosecution to poke holes in them. Here's where things get even more interesting. Let's say you have a friend who is sitting in the row behind you. That friend would easily be able to rebut the testimony of the other person by saying that you were in your seat during the entire movie. That would destroy the prosecution's case. But again, maybe the state has more evidence. Maybe they have a video clip of that other person taking their seat in the row in front of you. and they were in their seat during the murder. So even though you have a friend who can rebut that testimony, it still won't help you unless you can show that you left your seat sometime before the murder took place. This is why it's so important to follow the proper procedure when being questioned by law enforcement. You need to understand your rights, and you need to know what to do. Otherwise, you may inadvertently give up your rights. Let's say you were smart and you asked for an attorney during the questioning. Then the police would stop questioning you and they would ask you if you would be willing to write down everything you were doing during the time of the murder. If you agreed to do that, then you would be able to present that written statement as evidence to support your alibi. Unfortunately, though, there are many people who don't follow proper procedure. Many people don't know their rights. They feel like they have nothing to hide, so they agree to answer questions. Unfortunately, the innocent people usually end up implicating themselves when they try to explain their version of events. Here's a great example of that. Let's say the police come to your house and ask to speak to you about the murder. You're innocent, but you don't have an attorney, so you let them in your house and you answer their questions. You tell them that you were at the movies during the murder. You tell them which movie you watched, and you tell them what time you arrived and what time you left. Then the police ask you if you would be willing to take a polygraph test. You pass the polygraph test, but then the police decide that they need to search your house. Searching your house, they find a bloody knife in your kitchen sink. You weren't trying to clean it up, but you used it to cut food earlier in the day. So now you have blood on you. You have blood in your house, and you gave the police a detailed timeline of your whereabouts during the murder. If you wanted to testify now and say that you weren't at the movies, your testimony would be completely unbelievable. Your entire story would be destroyed. This is why it's so important to protect yourself. Know your rights and exercise them. Don't voluntarily give the police any more information than you have to. If they tell you that you are a suspect, respectfully tell them that you will not answer any questions without an attorney present. Then stay silent until your attorney arrives. If they try to trick you into thinking that you aren't in trouble, respectfully tell them that you are exercising your right to remain silent. Don't let them trick you into giving up your rights. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think this person's alibi will hold up? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, please subscribe. Thank you for watching.